Hi, everybody. This is Dan Stolbarger. Welcome to this week's Middle East update. It's the week of April 22nd, and boy, lots going on, especially when we see this convergence of Ramadan, Easter, and Passover. Knowing that Easter's sort of in the rearview mirror, but we're still in the days of Passover as well as Ramadan, and things are bubbling in the cauldron, so to speak. So we're going to take a look at that. This is the week again of April 22nd. A reminder, grab the PDF PowerPoint. There's always more information on that than we have time for in the YouTube. And you can get that on our website, holygroundexplorations.com. So we always start with our news bites. We're going to center in kind of this session is going to be primarily what's going on in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. But before we get there, we need to look at Ukraine and Russia and what's going on there. The threat of nuclear war, that's right, nuclear war, just got real as Russia has flown in nuclear bombers near the Ukrainian border. We're going to have to, again, in our minds, we're thinking, no possible way. Let's take a second. The days in which we're living, I think we got to get rid of that statement, right? Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has said on Wednesday, I know I shift this as the News Bite section, has basically said that Israel's indoor mask mandate will be lifted at the end of the week. And we know here in the States that we're dealing with airports, planes, mask mandates, all sorts of things sort of swirling there. We're just going to have to wait and see. As we sort of now focus in on what's taking place in Israel, primarily Jerusalem, specifically the Temple Mount, Hamas issued a statement saying, just as we defeated the flag march, so too we will defeat the policy of invading the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We are here. This is the head of Hamas. Hanaya basically says, quote, we will continue to defend Jerusalem, the Muslim holy sites. Now, there's going to be a pecking order here, a desire to be named the one who is the greatest protector, whether it's Hamas, whether it's Fatah. Now we're going to find Russia coming on the scene as well. What's taking place is that whenever there's a violent outbreak of rioting or whatever, if there's a lull too long, and it always serves the advantage of the Palestinians, all they have to do is make threats, not so much threats, but in a sense leak out the fact that they believe Israel is planning to take over the Temple Mount. One thing that we do know in the end of days, that the man of lawlessness will make some sort of covenant of peace with Israel, and many believe that this genius of a leader is going to come up with a way of dividing up the Temple Mount. So that's always in the back, in the rearview mirror of what's coming. Is it possible that both sites on the Temple Mount will be made available for the Jewish temple, for Christian worship, and of course for the Al-Aqsa Mosque? And that's always sort of circulating, and it's the eye of the hurricane right now, because there's no truth to this. But again, if you want to stir up the populace, you just have to make the statements. Israel's planning on taking over the Temple Mount. So in the midst of all this, in the midst of the end of days, in the midst of us thinking about the Ezekiel 38 and 39, we have focused in on Russia and what's taking place, of course, with Ukraine. But it now seems that things are heating up between Jerusalem and Russia. The bottom line is statements are being made by the foreign minister of Russia as well as Putin. They basically are leaking, and not so much leaking, coming out and simply saying Russia has decided to side with the Palestinians over the Temple Mount, despite the fact that Israel has maneuvered carefully between Russia and the West and Ukraine. It doesn't seem to matter because Russia is making the statement that they're kind of pulling back from Israel and siding with the Palestinians. They've always wanted to use them as a way of claiming Jerusalem. Again, that scenario with Ezekiel 38 and 39, always the backdrop. And so expect Russia more and more to claim and to side with whether it's Hamas, and we'll get into these articles, or Fatah. That's what's happening. That's what we're seeing taking place at this particular time. And some would say, okay, so is this a prelude to what the Bible says about a coming invasion from the north into Israel, which in my opinion begins to knock those dominoes over in terms of the end of days. Well, as I've already mentioned, these sites, there's articles here, Putin and Abbas, phone calls being made, Putin's rejecting Israeli actions on the Temple Mounts, talking to Abbas saying, hey, we're with you, and then says, and by the way, we will provide for all of your needs. If you're in need of wheat, materials, crops, things such as that. So relations with Moscow and Jerusalem are remaining tense, especially whenever Israel makes any statements that can be construed as a condemnation of war crimes in the Ukraine. And then we have Hamas. And the leader of Hamas is Ismail Haniyeh, I should say. He's expressing his appreciation for the Russian position in support of the Palestinians' rights and the rejection of the ongoing Israeli steps in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. He's calling for Russia to be the peace partner. And no longer are we dealing with the European Union, are we dealing with the U.S., now the cry is, our friends, Russia, let's bring them into the mix to sort all this out. And again, Putin is making it very, very clear that he's condemning the actions of Israel. We've already seen sort of what I would call a nuclear bomb taking place with Putin siding with Syria in regards to the Golan Heights. And now we're seeing this cozying up between Russia, the Palestinian Authority, as well as Hamas. Another article here in regards to what's simply called the simple truth. The Biden administration, as long as we focus in on things like construction of apartments for the Jews, and we make that a greater issue than the shootings and the stabbings that are taking place in malls and bars, the Palestinians will continue to increase the violence. A senior Fatah leader explained that the recent murders that have been taking place in Tel Aviv is precisely what the Palestinian Authority leadership wanted and has called for. So make no mistake about it. This in a sense, this timing of Ramadan and Passover or whatever is just perfect timing for the Palestinians to create violence, chaos, all for their purposes. And in the middle of it, we have Israel. We have a failing government at this point in time. This next article talks about not only did Bennett lose a key Knesset member that took away his 61 vote majority for the Knesset, but also now the Arab party that he cozied up to that has 4 seats has, quote, frozen their relationship with the current administration. And so if this freezing leads to, in the party's called, if it causes them to step out and Bennett loses 4 more votes, then the government will collapse before it even hits the 1-year mark. And so in the midst of all the chaos that's taking place, just keep in mind what's going on behind the scenes. And then again, Ramadan's supposed to be this time where Muslims get closer to Allah, but in reality, it's a clear snapshot of the difference between Judeo-Christian values and Islamic values. Easter, Good Friday, Passover. The desire of Judeo-Christians is draw nearer to God, to walk closer to Jesus, to understand God's deliverance. It's a time of serenity and peace. Opposite, Ramadan is a time of violence, choosing death, martyrdom. We have rockets that are being fired now. Just the perfect excuse. Let's rile the people up. Let's show them who their hero should be. Let's fire rockets into Gaza. And that's the aim of Hamas at this point in time, to create chaos, plunging Israel into another political crisis. It's the seedbed, and that's what's taking place. I want to wrap this up by simply saying, why, this last slide here, I say that the Temple Mount is ground zero. Why do I believe that? Why do I believe it's important for us to understand what in the heck is going on in these days? Zechariah informs us that as we approach the end of days, we should not be surprised that Jerusalem will be front and center in the eyes of the entire world. And not just Jerusalem. I'm going to zero in on this picture. Ground zero is going to be the Temple Mount. But the question has to be asked, why? The city that's capturing the headlines of news stations worldwide. Why? Why Jerusalem? It's got no natural harbor. It's not situated on any major trade route. It's not a gateway city. It's not known for its banking or its industrial or its commercial or its medical centers whatsoever. It's got no natural resources, no oil, right? It's too hilly for the airport. The airport's like 30 miles away, right? 40 miles away. It doesn't command any real strategic high ground. It's got nothing at all to commend it except the fact that God chose it. He chose it for himself. He said that in the end it will be a cup of trembling for all the nations. It is ground zero. And Satan, because he knows that God has chosen it, that makes it his most desirable piece of real estate. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Let us be like the sons of Issachar that understand the times and know what we should be doing. Watchmen on the wall, biblically literate to what the scriptures say is impending. That is the name of the game. That's why KFIR exists. That's why we send out Middle East updates. So share this with your friends. And again, a reminder as we close, we're going to Israel come September. We'd love you to come with us check it out on our website, holygroundexplorations.com. God bless you, and shalom.